Hello and welcome everyone. We are here with David Zemach-Bersin for a live chat about his program Liberate Your Hands and Wrists. We are starting the live stream on Instagram, so bear with us while we wait for that to go live. And in the meantime, if you're on Facebook or YouTube and you are here for the live chat, please write in your questions if you have one, or comment, or anything that you'd like to say. We'd love to hear from you. We will begin momentarily. If anybody who's joining has participated in the Liberate Your Hands and Wrists program already, and you have something to share with the group, that would be lovely to hear from you. And if you've done maybe just the first lesson, that would be great to hear from you as well. If you have any questions about yourself and what you're going through and whether or not this program would be appropriate for you, please write in about that. Okay, great. We are live. Welcome, everyone. My name is Juniper. I'm the managing producer for Feldenkrais Access, and I'm so happy to be here with you all for a live chat regarding David's program, Liberate Your Hands and Wrists, with David. David, would you like to say something before we get started? Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay. I thought since you muted me, you could unmute me. No. Okay. No, I only want to say that I'm very happy to be here with you and look forward to having a dialogue about our extraordinary hands and wrists.
Awesome, which just to remind people is 35% off through the month, through the end of September. So if you haven't yet taken advantage of that, please do. David, I'd like to start us off with a general question about the program. And can you speak to anyone who is considering the program, considering participating in this program? Can you speak about the benefits that they can anticipate?
Well, I don't want to take up too much time, but the benefits are multitudinous and fundamental. So the first place I would put the emphasis is on the fact that we all use our hands. And in today's contemporary world, we're all using our hands on the computer, on our keyboards extensively. So for some of us, it's 10 hours a day. For others, maybe less, maybe more. But the fact is that this work with keyboards has created an epidemic of hand tension, pain, chronic pain injuries such as carpal tunnel. And so these lessons will help alleviate that discomfort and pain and help you to be able to continue doing what you're doing at the keyboard, but in a better, what I would call a better organized way. An area that interests me a great deal is the fact that our hands are extremely connected to our involuntary nervous system. That is the part of our nervous system that is not being regulated by or regulating our muscular activity, but rather is responding to our unconscious and to, as you know, most of you know, the old fight or flight response, or rest and digest is the other aspect. Now, when we have that fight or flight response, which again happens unconsciously, spontaneously, is, most of you probably know this, but we clench our hands and we pull our chest down, we pull our head forward, our neck down, and many other things happen physiologically, but that's the important thing for us, is that the hands clench. Now, when we sustain trauma or prolonged stress, what happens is that we continue to hold this contraction in our hands. And rather than the hands being soft and open, they tend towards being clenched. And so the lessons in this series are oriented with this in mind, this idea of the extraordinary innervation of our hands in our brain. Many of you probably know that our mouth and tongue take up enormous room in our brain, but so do our hands. And so, with that in mind, these lessons were created to access these involuntary centers of ourselves. And so the lessons have a very effective secondary benefit of calming our nervous system. I know from hearing from many people that some people use hand lessons for putting themselves to sleep at night, or if they wake up during the night, calming themselves, putting themselves back into what's called a parasympathetic state, and by using these hand lessons. So that's just touching on a few of the benefits. If you want me to continue, I'm afraid I would probably take a great deal of our time, but I'm happy to.
Well, I'm sure people would love to hear more about the potential benefits, because even that is a kind of relaxation in itself, isn't it? We do have a comment, not a question, from someone who wrote into YouTube to say that the pain that they experience comes more from trackpads and a computer mouse rather than the typing. Can you speak about that in relationship to the program?
Well, it's the same issue. We're having to fix the hand in a particular position for prolonged periods of time. So this is always a problem. And in the new series that I'm teaching on joint pain, trying to make the point very clear that joints, that includes the hands. You know that we have 27 individual bones in each hand, so that's a lot of places of articulation. Well, that joints maintain their health through movement, so that any prolonged static position is apt to, if it's done over a period of months or years, well, then it's very likely to result in poor circulation in the joint, with poor stimulation of the synovial fluid, and then can result in, for many people, in arthritis. So I'm not saying that you need to stop using a trackpad. I'm saying that by doing the lessons, you'll give your hands the relief that they need.
And a greater repertoire, is that correct as well? That we develop patterns of movement that limit us to a certain extent,
Right,
and we can
right,
expand
exactly.
that.
That's right. Chronic fixed ways of using or holding the hands.
Okay, great. The same person wrote in to ask if this program is the right place for them to start, since most of their pain is actually in their neck and shoulders. I have stiffness in my fingers, but not pain.
Well, so firstly, the answer is yes, and I'll say why. Firstly, everything that we have created at Feldenkrais Access is accessible to anyone who has done no Feldenkrais lesson before, has no familiarity with the method. At least in my teaching, I approach the first few lessons especially as if everyone is naive, inexperienced. The second thing is, and very important, which is that often there's a profound connection between discomfort in the hands and discomfort in the shoulders and neck. So, and this happens because of the interconnectedness and the nerves that come from the neck and come in this area of the shoulder and then go down the arm and then ultimately feeding the fingers. Well, many people, they have discomfort or pain in their hands, and it has nothing, I mean, absolutely zero to do with their hands. And I know that's a remarkable statement, but in fact, it's coming from their neck. And I remember once I was working with somebody who was a musician at a very, very high level, and the doctors are telling him he's having to have hand surgery and this and that because they're going to do the carpal tunnel surgery. And I told him and I was confident. I don't think your problem is in your hands at all, but it's in your neck. And I think that you've got too much pressure happening in a certain area of his neck, and that is irritating the nerve root that's feeding the arm and hands. So yes and yes, I think it's just a great place to start. There's also Liberate Your Neck and Shoulders. You may prefer to start there if you like. And I just want to make another note. You said, I don't have pain in my hands. I have discomfort. Well, discomfort is what precedes pain. So so I think the easiest time to solve a chronic problem, a problem of any sorts, is today. The easiest time to ameliorate or solve or treat or remediate, maybe is the better word, any difficulty is now, meaning that we inhibit the progression of the difficulty. So I hope that answers your question, and feel free to write more.
Thank you, David. We have a little bit of a lengthy question, so I'm just going to start, and if you need me to repeat the question, please say so. So Dina is asking, there are several hand videos, and is wondering if this is the best one to begin with. And then they add more information about their background. So I'll tell you about that. They write, I don't have pain, but since a stroke about 2 to 3 years ago, my right arm and hand don't work very well, and both hands don't have much feeling, i.e., they can't tell silk from wool. And David, just to let you know, the other hand series that at least I can think of that's available on YouTube is Soothe and Calm, but we also have the first aid hand relief that's available on the website. So that might be what they're thinking about.
I think there's also from quite a few years ago a video.
On YouTube?
I think
Mhm.
so. So firstly, these lessons are different, created more recently. And I am confident that you can improve your ability to make sensory distinctions. Yes, I understand you had a stroke, but on your side of improving is the fact that our hands have more sensory innervation than anywhere else in our entire body. Okay? There's more sensory nerve fibers in our hands than anywhere else. So that means, and those nerves are still there. You simply need, and I believe that the lessons provide this for you, you need to remind your brain, use the lessons to remind your brain of what you knew. How in your development as an infant, as a child, as an adult, how you learned to develop that sensory appreciation and the various movements, the dexterity is a better word, the dexterity of your hands and fingers. And I, I think you'll improve very nicely.
Great, thanks, David. Someone else writes in to ask, I have essential tremors, more noticeable in my hands. After practicing, I've been able to see the tension in my hands. Have you heard of essential tremors being improved with Feldenkrais?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without hesitation. Now, again, essential tremors can be originating in difficulties in your neck. So it's best if we have um, two things: a holistic appreciation of ourselves. In other words, that we are at every moment an integrated whole, and that things are not, that the idea of things happening in segments or in places or just in one finger or this or that is a misnomer. Things like tremors, trigger finger. Trigger fingers are very common. I had trigger fingers myself, and it wasn't that simply working with my fingers uh, ameliorated the trigger fingers, which I don't have anymore. But again, lessons that involved my breathing, my neck, my shoulders, I think all went into. It wasn't that the hand lessons were not essential. So so um, I wouldn't necessarily think a priori that the essential tremor is necessarily a hand problem. Of course, it's your problem. I understand. In other words, it's your challenge and your difficulty. But I think that hand lessons will be useful, and I think they can calm the tremors. But I also think that you might get great benefit from, for example, a breathing series of lessons or the neck and shoulder lessons. And you might say, oh my gosh, I was doing that neck and shoulder lesson and my hands feel so much softer. So um, that's my counsel for you.
Wonderful, David. Those are all the questions that we received from the people who are here with us live now. But maybe you can speak again about some of the benefits that you haven't mentioned yet in the meantime while we wait for more questions to come in.
Sure. I think the lessons are, look, extremely useful for musicians. The dexterity that they need, whether it's playing a stringed instrument, keyboard instrument, um, the dexterity of the hands, the ability to differentiate sensorially with the hands and make the connection between what I'm doing with my hands and what I hear in my ears is of the utmost importance. I think also that the lessons are extremely useful if one is older. Why? Because very often when we're older, one of the most common complaints is arthritis in the hands. And this arthritis, again, is developing because of the chronic habitual patterns of self-use that I have, the ways that I use my hand, the way that there's latent muscular tension in my hands. And so back to the very first question, you see there, arthritis is developing maybe because of circulatory problems in the hands, in the individual joints. And so I think that these lessons will be extremely useful if you have any kind of arthritic complaints in your hands.
We do have a question from someone who plays the violin who writes that their hands specifically get tired. So you spoke about the dexterity. Will this also help this person who has an increase in fatigue in their hands?
Of course, because the fatigue that you feel is related to the unnecessary muscular effort. Whether it's your bowing hand or your fingering hand, the unnecessary muscular effort or tension, maybe some would say, is what causes the fatigue. And these lessons will absolutely help you to reduce that unnecessary tension or effort.
Great. We have a comment from Dina who wrote in after your answer to say many thanks for the answer, that they will purchase the program and that the current series on joint health and recovery is wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And Nicholas has another question about musicians. When we need to develop more speed in our fingers and precision, are any of the 6 lessons of the series, would you recommend them more than another?
Excellent question. No, and I'll explain to you why. Most often, when I do a series, maybe always, in fact, the lessons progress. And so that the lessons are connected to one another. In other words, there's a series of I conceive of it, at least, think of it in my own mind, as a series of approximations. And so the lessons tend to go from the more simple to the more complicated. From the less demanding maybe to the more demanding or the more complicated. So I would begin at the beginning. I would. And again, I want to say that I think that the most productive strategy for you is that your speed will increase. And I feel confident of this. And I've worked with many, many hundreds of musicians. Your speed will increase as that unnecessary effort begins to recede and be reduced, minimized. So I would say to you, all the lessons will improve this idea of speed and reduce your tendency towards fatigue. And I welcome all of you. You can write to me through the Feldenkrais Access platform and ask questions of me once you get engaged with the series, and I'm happy to respond.
Great, wonderful. And for anyone who's following up with this live chat after it's over, please feel free to type a question into the live chat post as well. I want to add a phrase that I actually left off of Nicholas's question, which is, I guess, the first ones that are more finger focused, meaning that those would be more applicable. And it suddenly occurred to me that maybe you would have some insight about that, because not necessarily, right, that the overall organization may help improve Nicholas's speed and dexterity.
I'm not sure I'm understanding correctly, but if I am, I would say that again, if we have this holistic perspective, firstly, I'm not sure if there's any lessons in the series that don't involve the fingers, but that also that the changing the larger muscles of our hands are proximal, in other words, closer to the center of the body. So these are the proximal muscles of our hands, and these are the distal. These muscles that regulate the fingers are much smaller than these larger muscles, and so the sensitivity and the speed and the dexterity of the fingers is dependent on these larger muscles of the hands. So again, having that kind of integrated, call it holistic point of view about how the musculature and our nervous system work, how our whole self works, I think you'll find great benefit in all the lessons.
Nicholas had a follow-up question, which I think helps clarify where they're coming from and relates to what you just said. So maybe you have already spoken to this, but I'm going to read it and you can decide. No, Nicholas just wrote, that answers the question, but I'll read it anyway. I completely trust your experience in Feldenkrais structure, but still find it hard to understand why the majority of this hand series, that the movement involves more arm movement than fingers.
You're right. I answered the question, but not explicitly, but because you're smart, you inferred the answer. That's right. That our neck, our shoulders, which are again proximal to the hand, right? These you can see easily, my biceps, my triceps, the muscles of my upper arm are larger and more powerful than the muscles of my wrist, my lower arm, or my hands. And so we can liberate and affect beautiful change in the hands, sometimes by reducing the habitual patterns that are above. So above, so below. I'm not being facetious. I mean, as we reduce the unnecessary effort above, that will have a corollary effect on our hands and fingers, on your hands and fingers.
We have a question that is coming in, but there's only half of it available to me right now. I think the text is uploading or something, so I'm going to start off reading it slowly. I've been doing lessons for a few years, and this is a recent development. It happens no matter which lesson I'm doing. Everywhere else feels much better. Just this lower back pain and stiffness. Maybe that's the end of the question.
Well, I don't know what programs you have done. And firstly, I would ask you, has the pain in your lower back not changed at all? Or is it simply, was it worse 1 year ago? But it's still present and it's a little better frequency. How would one measure better? Well, I think by the frequency or the intensity of the discomfort. And
David, can I jump in? I accidentally left the portion of the question that I was missing. It was here already. I'm just going to add that now, if you don't mind. So they write, I find all of your lessons very helpful, but recently I have noticed that I get stiffness and pain in my lower back afterwards. I can't seem to find the right lesson to address this. I've been doing lessons for a few years, and this is a recent development. It happens no matter which lesson I'm doing. Everywhere else feels much better. Just this lower back pain and stiffness.
Well, firstly, we do have a couple of series, which Juniper can put in the chat, which relate particularly to lower back pain. And I would say that maybe consider making a few adjustments, which would be maybe having your knees bent or having some large pillow behind your knees, but having your knees bent and your feet standing, I think would reduce the contraction of the muscles of your lower back. That might be helpful. And I would keep a little notebook, a little diary maybe, of when you find a lesson that doesn't result in an an increase in this discomfort, or helps you to feel you don't feel the pain after that lesson. And I would do that lesson maybe more often. So in other words, a lesson that you can identify as, oh, that actually, when I stood up and after the lesson, that pain didn't rear itself up. And so maybe that lesson is, I can't be certain, but it could be a good guess that lesson is particularly helpful to your lower back pain. And so keep doing that lesson and see if that helps.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to everyone who came and participated. This has been a really exciting and inspiring chat. And thank you,
I
David.
just want to say one more thing to the last person. Again, feel welcome to write to Feldenkrais Access, to write to Juniper, to write to me if you have questions, because I really believe that that a lot of the pain that we feel is not necessary. In other words, can be ameliorated through using these lessons.
Okay, and we just got another last minute question that I think is important for the group to hear. How can one use proximal distal reversal with finger, thumb, and wrist joints by oneself rather than with a practitioner?
Well, because you are using that technical vocabulary, I assume that you were at yesterday's class, a joint health and recovery class. And I think as we go along in the joint recovery series, you'll get more of an idea about how you can do it yourself. So lesson number 2 in that series is a great example, a very stark, if I might say, or easily perceivable example of how to use proximal distal reversal. And in terms of the hands, I gave you an example of if we, for example, here, there is a lesson in that series. Can you see that I can turn my hand or I can turn my arm? Do you see that? I can turn my hand or rotate, or I can rotate my lower arm. So here I have the origination happening with the proximal part of myself, rather than putting that as a strain. That could easily become a strain, originating that movement of turning. Anyway, you can, yeah, you'll see. It will. But thank you for the question. I'm glad somehow you were stimulated by lesson 2 in that series. It's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I hope everyone who is considering trying the series does so, and
I'll give you
keeps us
another
posted.
easy example. Just you tell me if it's already too much. Look, usually we move our head. If I turn my head relative to my torso, right? My head is distal to my torso. So I'm turning my head left and right relative to my chest. Well, why can't first I can have the movement originate proximally, right? Turning everything together, or I can keep my head fixed and turn my torso. That's reversing the proximal distal relationship. My chest is proximal, and I'm turning my chest relative to my head. Okay, just want to make it easier to decipher the idea.
Great. Thanks again. Thank you to everyone who came, and please keep us posted about your progress, either writing into the comments of the YouTube post or on the platform of the Feldenkrais Access website, and look forward to hearing from you soon. David?
Ciao. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your great questions and stimulating questions. And